So what we want to do, of course, is we want to get the scene put together, right? So that's what this video is going to be about, is putting together our scene. So what we can do is we can, of course, group and we can import. And that's what we're going to focus on this one. The next videos will be about Mudbox. I'll do some introduction to Mudbox. I'll show you about some color painting. And that'll get us good, particularly for the first part of this coming week. All right. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to learn how to group stuff, right? We've talked about ungrouping before, right? And you also just want to make sure to double check that you don't have any history. In this case, I've kind of already taken care of getting rid of the history for my UV unwrapping. But remember, edit, delete by type history, and that will get rid of any history you actually have for your UVs. You'll notice in your channel box layout, or you'll probably have one after you've UV unwrapped, you'll have some operations here, right? Some planar projections, some unfolds, things like that. So there will actually be history from the UV unwrapping. The UV unwrapping is operations, just like modeling. When you use a modeling tool, it's an operation. You're using a UV unwrapping tool. So UV unwrapping will create history here. And that's where just, you left click drag to select everything. Remember, do it in object mode, right? Hold down right mouse button, object mode. Select everything, and you can just do edit, delete by type history. In this case, I kind of have already gotten rid of my history. Also, there's no groups, right? So if there's any groups left over, usually history will get rid of that. If not, edit ungroup, right? We've seen that several times this semester as we clean up our outliners. So remember, if you have groups left over, ungroup them. Those groups are usually created because of certain modeling functions, things like Boolean, right? So if you go to edit mesh, right, you'll see there's extract and duplicate. If you go to mesh, you'll see there's things like combine and separate Booleans. These are the kind of modeling operations that will actually create groups. And it's honestly a little bit annoying. If you need to, you can always open this guy up right here. You can actually turn history off, right? Now, the thing though, sometimes is you do want history. Not a lot, but sometimes you do, right? Sometimes it's useful. It'll still sometimes create groups, and I found that occasionally certain tools might not work the way you expect them. So on the safe side, I kind of always left history on, and it's great for you guys to know and use history at least somewhat in our intro class, which we've used on occasion. But you can technically turn history off if you want to. In this case, we like to make sure that history is deleted. We like to make sure our transforms are frozen, and any groups that were left over, we get rid of. Usually deleting history will get rid of all the groups, but occasionally some will be left over, and that's where you select the group and you edit and ungroup it, right? So in this case, though, we actually want group, right? It's actually a good organizational tool. The whole reason we've ungrouped stuff in the past and we didn't want groups is because Maya was creating its own groups that we didn't want, that weren't organized the way we wanted them to be. So in this case, we'll just, left click drag to select everything, right? Remember, left click drag is that box select. Whatever that box touches, it selects. And of course, we can go to edit, group, and there's a group. Now you'll notice it's got that red arrow and that little plus, which you guys have seen before as we've cleaned up outliners. You'll notice that if you click off of it, you can click back on it. It selects the whole group. In fact, if you click on a single object, right, in the regular 3D viewport, and you hit the up arrow on your keyboard, it actually selects the group, which is a really cool shortcut in Maya. You'll also notice this little plus. If you click on it, it opens it up, and there's all your objects inside that group. Now, just like you could double click on any one of these objects, right, and you can name it, you can do the same thing with the group. Double click on it and name it. This will be called end table. There we go. And there's our group. And we can hit save this scene. And there we go. So now we're going to do it to a couple more scenes before we import it into the master scene. So that's the end table. So let's do it to the bed. All right. So bed. There we go. And in this case, we can see once again, I've kind of already deleted my history. But, if you hold down right mouse button, go to object mode, right? Left click drag your pick mark key. Remember, that's just, if you go to modeling toolkit, that's just your default selection tool usually is pick mark key. Drag select, of course, can be really, really cool. I love it. But pick mark key definitely is something you're going to use often as well. So you kind of often go back and forth between those. So in this case, we select everything. We can always do a quick edit, delete type by type history if you haven't done that yet. Because remember, any UV unwrapping you did is going to be there. You might not have as many on these because we did a lot more unfolding on them, but always delete history. Those transforms should already probably be frozen, but never hurts to freeze them again, right? Modify freeze transformations. I usually freeze transforms after I've deleted history though and ungrouped everything. Right? When we talk about bringing the groups in to the main Maya scene, I'll talk more about why. But in this case, remember, we don't want any groups in here except the ones we create. We want stuff labeled. And usually after I've gotten rid of all groups and deleted history, that's when we could freeze transforms. So let's go to edit, and we'll go to group, and then we can double click, and we can call this bed. There we go. Remember, you can select the group in Outliner, particularly if you have multiple groups or objects. You can always just, Windows, Outliner, right? So remember, Windows Outliner brings this up, right? Windows Outliner. Something we've seen plenty already, right? As we've cleaned up our outliners for our previous projects, but I always like to reinforce things. So Windows Outliner brings this up. And in this case, remember, if you click on a single object and you hit up arrow on your keyboard, it selects the whole group. You open that plus, your regular objects are in there, although they can be selected normally in the viewport also. So groups, overall, pretty cool. Useful for organizational stuff, particularly when you're going to work in a much bigger scene, right? These are all kind of their own little assets, right? The bed's its own kind of model, even though it's made of several objects. The end table was. We would call them an asset, right? Because it's a full kind of complement of several objects making one completed thing. A desk, an end table, right? An asset. And that's grouping, particularly when you want to keep several objects separate. Grouping can be a great way to take multiple assets into like the larger, bigger master scene, right? So that's why we're working on the grouping. And it's great to know about grouping as well. So let's say scene again really quick just to make sure. File, open scene. Let's see. Let's do chair really quick. So chair. There it is. Of course, we can, make sure hold down right mouse button to go to object mode. Left click drag to do your pick marquee. If you have any history, right, from the UV unwrapping, edit, delete by type history. There we go. If there's any groups, right, select them in here. Edit, ungroup until there's no more groups. If you have any kind of leftover parts, because sometimes you'll have like things called transforms that are grayed out and they look like a group. They've got like the little red arrow, but there's no plus, and it's kind of this. It says transform 3, transform 7, whatever, and it's grayed out. At that point, if you deleted history, those are just kind of leftover stuff that you don't need anymore. You can just select and delete those if the delete history didn't get rid of that. Often delete history will take care of most of that for you. So in this case, we select both. We go to edit, group. There we go. Call this chair. Remember, double click on it. Call it chair. Let's save that. There we go. And of course, file, open scene. And let's see, let's do the desk. There we go. There's our desk. And of course, hold down mouse button, object mode. Left click drag, select everything. In this case, you can see everything's kind of already cleaned up, right? I've done delete history, edit delete history to get rid of any history there. In this case, since there's no groups, you can always do your modify freeze transformations on those. And in this case, they're already labeled, and I didn't need to ungroup anything, but if you need to, remember edit, ungroup. In this case, I want to group, so it's in that same menu, right? Edit menu, delete by type history is there, but a few more down is the group and ungroup stuff. So in this case, we're in group, and of course we can double click on that, call it desk. Now remember, you can select the group in Outliner. You can hit plus to open it up to see all your objects in there. And you can even click on any one object in the viewport and hit up arrow on your keyboard. And that will allow you to create groups. Kind of save these scenes up. We'll go to open scene here, and let's see, let's look at the clock. In this case, the clock is one object, and I've kind of already cleaned it up here as well. It might not be quite cleaned up in yours, right? So if you guys need to, just select your clock and just go to edit, delete by type history, and that will get rid of any the groups that might be hanging out there. And then you could double click on it and you could, name it clock. There we go. Transforms are frozen, history is deleted, right? So there we go. Or just edit, delete by type history. You can freeze transforms, and if there's no groups in here, which there shouldn't if you did that, you can always ungroup them if you need to. In this case, it's one object, so we don't need a group for that one. But just want to make sure everything was kind of in good shape there. And now we're going to go to File, Open, and we're going to open up the room, because that's kind of where we're at. We've grouped the bed, we've grouped the chair. The clock radio didn't need it because it was just one object. We've grouped the desk and the end table. And so now what we want to do is we want to open up the room. Now the room, once again, is like the clock. It's really just one object, right? If you guys are using your own assets, because you still have them, you probably might have the door separate, the trim separate, a little doorknob. You can create a group for those, right? You can always go to Edit, Group, for room for that stuff. So just kind of everything we did there. In this case, you know, I didn't have access to my stuff. It was at Cogswell. So I just kind of recreated simple versions of these that would be good for our texturing. All right. So in this case, there was only one object, and it's labeled, and history is deleted, and transforms have been frozen. All right. So at this point, all we really need to do is start importing everything into this master scene. And that brings us to importing, right? Because this first part of the video was about groups and how to create groups. And you're going to see in a minute why they're really useful. It can be a cool way to organize stuff. It's just you want to use the groups that you made, right? That are specifically made to function the way you want them to function, not the way Maya was doing them, right? Certain modeling functions do that. But you'll notice in the file menu, there's importing and exporting, right? We did referencing early in the semester, and we saw that was pretty neat, right? Particularly if you're working in a team or a really, really huge complex scene, you can load those references in, right? You can create a reference into the scene, and it basically is importing, but it keeps that connection to the original scene. So if you go back and change the original scene, you can go into reference editor and upload it, right? You can update it. You can have it tell reload. In this case, because I want this to just be one scene file so that you can turn in one scene file when you turn your projects in, it's going to be a lot easier for us to not use references in this case. And we already did an exercise on that. In this case, we're going to be importing and exporting. And it's good to do these as well, and to know we can do this as well. So Maya can import its own scenes. So we're just going to be importing Maya scenes into Maya scenes. You do notice, though, that there are exporting functions, right? And if we go to the options box for, like, say, export selection, you'll notice there's my binary, which is our default Maya file, right? Maya ASCII, of course, another Maya file type. The biggest difference, ASCII files tend to be a bit bigger because they carry around the information so that you can actually open them in, like, say, Word, right? And if you need to change some of the actual code for the scene, you can do that. Often you're not going to need to do that, so my binary is going to be fine, and you guys have noticed my binary is the default. We talked about this earlier in the semester. Since we're talking about importing and export, it never hurts to talk about it again. But you'll notice there are a lot of other file formats in here too. Things like FBX, OBJ, and these can take model and UE data in particular to different software. FBX can actually take more than OBJ can, but these are pretty common file formats, FBX, OBJ, and they can get you between not only Maya, of course, but you can take this to the Mudbox that way, although we're going to use send to Mudbox. We'll see that on the next video. You can import and export stuff from, say, Blender or 3D Studio Max, Cinema 4D, Modo, right? There's more than just Maya out there, right? And if you might be working with different people that using different software. So you can import and export different file formats. You can, of course, get stuff in and out of Maya to different software, and that's great. So you can always export stuff out to take it to different software, but you can also import that stuff as well. So if I go to File Import, you'll see it's taking us kind of right where the scenes are at, right there. But you notice if we go down to File Types, all those file types like FBX and OBJ are in there as well. So you'll notice that we do actually have these file formats available for importing also. So it's not that we can just export stuff out to different software. We can import stuff in from different software, right? Rarely do you usually work in one software all the time for everything, and particularly in a big studio environment. So you can import and export different file formats, and you can get stuff in and out of different software. In this case, we're just bringing stuff from Maya into Maya. So we're just importing Maya scenes into Maya scenes. In this case, we're importing stuff into the room. So we'll start with the bed. Grab the bed there, import, continue. There's our bed. Now in this case, we click on one of the objects because you see there's the group there, and we hit the up arrow, and that selects the whole group, and now it becomes a lot easier to move it and position it, right? So we can hit W for move, we can move it up a little bit, hit E for rotate, rotate it a bit this way. If we want that extra precision, right, channel box layer editor instead of modeling toolkit, and we can just go right to the rotate Y axis, type in -180, and that will fully spin it around. And then of course W for move, we can move it over here. There's our bed, and you can see it actually came in pretty good size because we built it to scale pretty well. Now this is one of the cool things about groups is you noticed how everything transformed properly like it was one object, right? If I was to just select these as just their normal objects, right, without the group, and I was to scale them, you might notice stuff like this. Or if I was to rotate, right? Kind of interesting. So by using groups, it actually kind of treats it as one temporary object. Now, you'll notice if I click on any of these objects in here, you'll notice they don't have any transforms. With the up arrow, you see the group has transforms. That's one of the reasons why we like to actually delete history first, and then ungroup everything, and then I usually will do modify freeze transformations. Because if you delete history and then you select everything and you freeze transforms, you might be freezing the transforms for the group itself and not the specific objects. So I usually like to do the ungrouping if there's any groups left over before I do modify freeze transformations. And I know we've talked about that plenty of times in class, but never hurts to reinforce it. So we'll freeze transformations for that group, and we'll go File, Import, and we'll find the end table. There we go. And you see that imports the end table in. We can zoom in close enough. Select one of the objects. Hit up arrow right on the keyboard because I'll select the whole group. In this case, we're going to rotate it around. Like we said, remember, you can always type in the exact number right there, right? -180. There we go. And then, of course, we can move this back to your end table. And you notice how the bed and the end table came in pretty good size, right? Pretty much exactly the size we want them to be. So this should be in good shape there. Now we'll go File, Import, right? So we're not opening, right? We're importing. We want to bring another scene, another file into an already existing file. So we'll import, and we'll grab the clock. There we go. Now, the clock is probably going to be a little big. Like I said, I was just kind of trying to throw these together pretty quickly so you guys would have these. One, I would have them to make the video lectures. Two, you guys would have them if you need to, all right? So I'm moving it, and then I'm going to hit R for scale, because you can see how I did make this a little bit big compared to the other stuff. And we can start to position and rotate this clock to just be kind of on our end table. There we go. And then, of course, we can do Modify Freeze Transformations. And then we'll go File, Import. And then we'll bring in the desk. If I can find the desk. There it is. Import the desk. And it's over here. And we can see this is already in pretty good size. So really the one that was kind of a little bit off was the clock, right? So I'll select one of these objects. Remember, you can hit up arrow on your keyboard. That selects the whole group. You can always select the group from Outliner as well. Remember, this is Windows, Outliner, and you can always click on it in here. Let's bring this back a bit. Remember, F for frame selection is always useful. And you'll see that that works for groups just like it works for objects and edge loops and faces and vertices. Get that into place, and we'll freeze the transforms for that group. Remember, we're still at the group selection level. So we're freezing transforms from the Modify menu on the group itself. All the objects already had their transforms frozen. And now we'll go File, Import, and kind of get our last piece in here, the chair. Let's see, chair. There we go. Now in this case, you see the chair was a little big also. So we'll grab on one of the objects for the chair. Up arrow on the keyboard, because it's a great way to select your group really quickly. We'll hit R for scale. Kind of scale it down a little bit there. Start to move it into position here. Maybe rotate it a little bit. And make it a little more interesting. Maybe scale it down a little bit more. There we go. Kind of get in position. And you notice I'm making sure to try to get the wheels to touch the ground, right? You don't want your stuff floating really high off, right? So you always want to make sure that stuff's touching a bit. Just kind of get it in place right there. And of course, we can modify freeze transformations for that. Now, at this point, what we want to do is we want to save our master scene, right? And we want to create a project. So what we'll do is we'll go File, Project Window, right? And we've done this plenty of times this semester. File, Project Window. Now, in this case, you can kind of already see I created one, but you hit New, right? And you can give it this label, right? So hit New, and then you'll kind of type in exactly that, right? Just kind of DAA, whatever you want to do with it. In this case, I've already got it, so I'll take advantage of that. But you click on New button, you can type in the name, DA, Intro 3D Modeling, 240, Spring 20, Mike Roberts. There should be Project 5 there, and then _ Final Room. It's okay. Also, once you hit New, you'll notice you'll have the little browser folder available, right? The little yellow folder. So you click on that, and you can actually tell it where you want to create your project, right? So you can kind of tell it to make it on the desktop. Of course, we've done that plenty. We hit Accept. In this case, I've already created one. So we go File now that we've created the project from Project Window, and we go Set Project, right? And you'll notice that project is right there. We don't open it. We just click on the folder, and then we hit Set. That is now the active project. So now if I go to File, Save Scene As, you'll notice that I kind of already did a test run on this stuff, right? You can see that there already is a saved version of it. Then you can see I gave it the name, Intro to 3D Modeling, 240, Spring 20, my name, you guys will use your name, Project 5, Final Room. And what I could do is I could save as, but you'll notice that this went right to the project and went right to the scenes folder for that project. So I'll replace it. There we go. And of course, you know, if we go to open scene here, we can see it takes us right to scenes. The blue up arrow will take you up one more, and you can see that there's other folders in here, right? We've talked about projects a bunch this semester, but it never hurts to keep talking about it, right? Scenes where your scenes go at, but images and source images can be where your textures go out from when we export them from Mudbox. So that's why at this point, we kind of even wrapped the rooms on their own, the assets on their own, we brought them into the room, and now we're going to kind of use a project. So that's a great place to stop.